Hey, how is it going? So I am finally coming around to make this video something I kind of want to do for a while now. I just haven't really gotten around to it. Of course, now we have the EcoBoost Mustang on the channel, but the channel was actually started with the Cobra. But even though the channel started with the Cobra, the car that really took off and got a lot of people interested in my channel was my 14 SHO. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video, is some of the things I developed that you haven't seen for that car, and kind of just an all-around generalized summary of everything I developed for that car. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So as you know, I love making my own parts. At least I try. But sometimes it's best to leave the people who know what they're doing up to designing and making parts for your cars. But there were times where I think I was really close to success when making parts for some of my cars, especially the SHO. Now, of course, you know some of the things I've done. Just like I did with this car here, one of the best mods I did to the SHO was the airbox mod. The factory airbox on the SHO is actually not bad. It's got the scoop that goes here and it goes down. But that alone I don't think offered enough airflow. So, I went and drilled a hole in the side with a circle hole saw and, plumbed in what now is on this car, that flex pipe that went down and picked up air down in the fender well where it was much colder. That combined with a high flow K&N filter basically made the cheapest, most effective intake you could put on an SHO. So there was that. And then of course my biggest accomplishment was this right here. The custom rear X pipe. Went from prototype piece here to this finished beautiful 304 stainless piece here made by Wits End Fabrication. I still think I had the best sounding SHO ever to be put on YouTube. I do take pride in that, and I had plans to make that so much better, but unfortunately I got rid of the car before I could continue on that. So furthermore, some other things that I never went over was some of the cooling improvements I discovered while owning the SHO. Of course, being a turbocharged car, being a lot of engine and not a lot of space, it did build up a lot of heat, and it would build up quickly and get super heat soaked. So of course, some of the things I noticed that would help with heat soak was, first of all, removing the top engine cover. And the reason is the engine cover has all this insulation that does nothing but keep heat in. Of course, this helps with noise suppression and vibration, but it just trapped heat right on top of the motor and didn't allow any cooling. So obviously removing that was a big thing. And then the next thing I did, which further improved cooling, was actually removing, see, this car don't have it, but there were rubber strips along the hood. If you look on your SHO, you'll see exactly what I mean. Along the edge of the hood, there were, a rubber strip like this here. It was along the hood. And then there was one here along the front cover, that sealed up all the air. Now, while that was good probably for sealing air and dirt from getting into the engine compartment, what it was also good at doing, blocked any type of air that would make its way through. So by removing all of that, what happened is you had a tiny little gap that was between the hood and the radiator cover and the front bumper. So air would, get in through that hood, and since you'd had the front top cover off, it would go over the engine and help cool things. And that actually did help a lot to reduce heat soak on the engine. And I would notice that it would keep things a lot cooler, a lot longer than with everything how it was from the factory. But because I removed that piece, it did allow a lot more dirt, dust, and debris to enter into the engine bay, so I had to do a lot more cleaning. But it did help with cooling. So that was one of the other mods I don't think I've ever discussed on the channel and made any videos about that I did do to the SHO. Now here is something that I've talked about, but I'm not sure if I ever went and did a video. Maybe I did, I don't know. I don't think I ever did a video on putting it together, or I think I made like a teaser video about it. But yeah, this was my budget methanol injection setup. There's actually a piece missing that has been thrown away since because it was really not in good condition. But it was basically just like a little, I don't know, it was like yay big, tall, like this wide, something like that. It wasn't very big. It was a little reservoir with a tiny little pump. It was like a universal window washer thing. That was the main reservoir that held the methanol. And this was my really cheap budget system, and I could have made it cheaper, but I ended up splurging at stainless steel, snow performance lines, and whatnot to just because I was having problems with the original setup with leaks. So I went and did this setup for better sealing. But basically, all I did was use this right here, and this is just a standard like Hobbs switch that activates around I think it's 8 or 10 psi. No, maybe it's 10 psi, give or take 2 psi. So it would normally activate around 7 psi under load. It would start switching on. It was just a simple relay circuit that this was all done to. And this was a cheap pump. You would get, I got this off eBay. I think it was like 15 bucks. It's actually a really good little pump. Look, and it even says good pumps. But this held up to pure methanol, and it still works as far as I know. And it has really good flow, and it has really good pressure. I think it was like 100 psi of operating pressure. So this is what I used for the main pump. So the little reservoir not pictured was actually like a feed pump. It would, you know, just push the fluid down to this pump, and it was a passive pump. So if this pump picked up, this would just siphon the, you know, straight through that other pump. But that would feed and make sure there was no air bubbles in the line. It was kind of an idea I had to keep and make sure that it maintained, you know, a flow and there was no air bubbles. And then this pump, you know, there was a fitting that went from here to here, and it pushed it into this T section here. And I had two outlets. I had one that went up to the throttle body, or just before the throttle body, and I had one that just came out the exit of the intercooler, the factory intercooler. So I had two nozzles spraying there. And these were actually, was it McMaster-Carr is where I got these. These are really good, I forget what they're called. Like, they're misting nozzles, but they're designed to create a fine mist with lower pressures. So that's what I use, considering that this pump put out about 100 psi, and these nozzles are rated to work at 100 psi. It was much cheaper because these were like a few bucks, I think $5 or $6 for these nozzles, versus 20 or so bucks for something you paid from like Snow Performance or whatever. Yeah, and it worked really well. Now, I don't think it worked as well as a, you know, nicely put together kit from Snow Performance or whatever, but if you're on a budget, it worked well. I think because I splurged and got a little bit better lines here and whatnot, and I'm, you know, you can get these Hobbs switches a lot cheaper. I ended up getting this through Napa because I was being impatient and doing an order it online at the time. But I think it was like $120 in all of it, and you can do it for under $100, easy, and it worked well. So yeah, that was my budget methanol injection system I had for the SHO, and you know, it served its purpose. It did what I needed it to do, and I didn't spend a whole lot of money doing it. So now that we got all of that out of the way, there was one final modification that I was so bummed not to complete. This would have been a huge thing for the community to have something like this for the SHOs, to do it in a budget manner if they were willing to do so. But one of the big gatekeeping mods on the SHO is the high pressure fuel pump. Really, you have no option but to go and, you know, if you want to make big power, you pretty much just got to go and get a, you know, XDI 35 or something, you know, just to make a decent, reliable 400 wheel horsepower. It kind of sucks. And they're $1,200 pumps. It's ridiculous how much they cost. And I personally couldn't fathom the idea of having to spend that kind of money just to have a reliable 400 horsepower. That didn't make sense to me. So I decided I was going to find a better way. I was going to find another fuel pump that would work and was cheaper and put out the same pressure as the XDI 35. And I did. And that's this right here. It's funny because if you go on XDI's website, they compare some of their pumps to factory pumps, obviously. If you browsed around their website and checked all the cars they make pumps for, there were some interesting things. So I was looking around their website and I noticed their upgrades for the Cadillac ATS-V. And I was kind of shocked by what I found. I found out that the factory pump puts out the same pressure as the upgraded, the XDI 35 pump for the SHO. And I'm like, that really got the gears turning. So I started looking up ATS-V pumps, and I wanted to see exactly what was the deal about. So, of course, the biggest thing I could have done was buy a pump, so I did. As you can see here with the little V, this is an ATS-V pump off the 3.6 liter twin turbo V6 out of the ATS-V. And if you notice a few things about it, you would see that it's practically the same as the SHO pump. I measured the distance of the plunger here, and it was the same. And I was shocked to know that this mounts to the pedestal of the SHO. The only modifications needed was I had to widen out the holes here because this flange is a little bit more narrow than the SHO's flange. But everything else fits right into the little adapter that goes onto this. It fills up the space here, and it sat down right onto the cam lobe, exactly like the SHO fuel pump, the factory pump. The only thing that made this a pain to deal with is it has these fittings here. It has threaded fittings, which in the grand scheme of things was actually better. But it had threaded fittings on both ends, and these were very weird. I couldn't really figure out exactly what they were. I think I ended up getting, I don't know where they are now. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. I have parts everywhere. I had to make my own fuel lines to make this work. Oh, here's the other. Ooh, here's the other piece. This was also another piece I got off Napa. Kind of a little bit smaller. Wish I would have known better, but I got this off. It was from a different car and bent it and modified it to make it work. But I ended up making my own pieces to work the way they needed to. I could have done this many different ways, but this is how I did it this time. But basically the top one is your feed. So this came off here like that, and I was just utilizing the factory, which is now right here, the factory push connector, quick connector. Basically just kind of goes over like that, sits, locks into place. That's your feed, right? So then there was that, and then this is your outlet. See, the way the pump sits on the pedestal, it would go like that. The outlet was pretty much in the same exact spot as the factory, line that goes to the rails. It was in the same exact spot. This piece was made after I discovered something interesting. The only problem is, and the reason why this piece was made in the first place, is when I originally mounted the pump, I mounted it like this. And that's because this pump, the connector is actually, the electrical connector is actually like that. It is weird. So the only way it would clear to have enough space to actually put the connector in was to mount it this way. Which is why this piece was made, because it had a kind of curve, and I don't know, you kind of see that, and go back into the direction it needed to fit the pipe that goes to the fuel rails. But what I later learned, and this is what kind of halted me, because this is a $200 pump from the factory. This is, from AC Delco. And I didn't have the money at the time to go buy another one to keep this going. But what I didn't realize is this piece here, as you can fairly well see, can move. So let me take this off so you can see. So you can see this piece here, there's nothing actually physically holding it on. Right now I goofed it all up with silicone and whatnot, but all it does, it just slides on there. It's just a metal contact between this post piece and the inside. So this was actually able to rotate. If I'd known about that before, All you had to do was, I heated this up with a heat gun because I think there is some type of adhesive or something that kind of holds it in place. But then I just took a pair of pliers or vice grips or something just to, you know, get it around the metal part here, and then you can rotate this. And you can rotate it all the way up just like that, and it would put the connector position in the same orientation as the factory SHO fuel pump. So you theoretically I could have made this work. The connector was the same 2-pin connector. Everything was so similar between this pump and the SHO pump. Like I said, all you had to do was make the custom fittings here for the feed line. This line pretty much went exactly the way it was supposed to, with a little bit of bending of the factory line to the rails. This fit on the plunger just right. You just had to make some holes because this flange here was a little bit narrower than the SHO flange. But otherwise, everything worked once you got this connector upright. And I had it mounted briefly, and it worked. It built pressure, and it did what it needed to do. I never completed it because I ended up breaking this piece before I discovered that I could have just rotated it without breaking it. But yeah, this was a huge gatekeeper mod, because theoretically someone can go pick up a ATSV pump, couple $100, put a little bit of work in themselves, make some custom fuel lines, and they have essentially an XDI 35, and only paid what, $300-400 for it, maybe. You know, this was a huge thing. Now, I encourage anyone who sees this to try this, because unfortunately I don't have an SHO anymore. I can't do any more testing. I would love to know if this actually did work, because I would crap myself if this was the cheapest way to get fuel into an SHO. So yeah, that was all of my experimental and successful and unsuccessful projects there for the SHO. I really wanted to get around to making this video sooner, but I never did, unfortunately. But better late than never, right? So now, everyone who watched my channel for the SHO, maybe you can go take some of that stuff, experiment with your car, do some work. I know there's still a lot of people in the community developing parts for the car. Like I said, one of the main things I wish people would pursue was this fuel pump idea. Please, someone do this. I really want to know if this works or not. But anyway, yeah, that's going to be it for this video. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Share with everyone you know. If you want to see more content like this and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Keep a lookout for the next true car enthusiast video.